Yeah.
Every day is upside down in the Sonji land. Yay!
Every day is upside down in Sonji land.
Hi, and welcome to the Sonji Land Show, where everybody's upside down. And we are in New York, in Manhattan, and I'm at a really cool gym called Warrior Bridge. And I have the honor today to talk to Sean, who is the owner and founder of Warrior Bridge. And he is really good at handstands as well. And I've already learned some things. And yeah, let's hear about you. Let's hear about how you got into handstands.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I think I got into handstands when I was I know when I got into handstands. I was 12 years old and I saw a kid named David Ginsburg do it at his bar mitzvah. So there was the little breakdance circle broke out, and at one point he kicked up into a handstand, took a few steps, and I was like, that is what I want. So I knew that I wanted to be able to do that at my bar mitzvah, and I had a year to do it or something. And
So it started really early for you.
Well, I wanted to be able to do it. And basically that night he told me start standing, put your arms over your head and throw your hands down at the floor and try to kick your legs up. And that was basically the instruction that I had to start with. So I took that home to my parents' basement, and every day I tried to walk around on my hands, and I never really got all that far with it. And I didn't understand why I was falling over. But, I got to the point that I could kind of take a few steps, and at that point, I was no longer afraid of doing a handstand. It was something that I was trying, but I was never trying to balance a static handstand at that point. I was just trying to walk around on my hands. And then I saw people do it on skateboards because I was very into skateboarding when I was a teenager, and I was trying to ride a skateboard in a handstand and throw the board under me and do a flip. And I would try to cartwheel up and put the board on my hand. So I had a lot of experience doing these things that were kind of tangentially related to handstands, but I didn't balance my first handstand until I was in my early 20s. When I was in college, I would go to the gym and would try to do handstand push-ups at the wall. And I had taken maybe a few, in college, I started taking yoga classes. So they would have you do a crow pose. I remember in one of my first yoga classes, I did a crow pose and the teacher was like, "That's really good. Can you do it into a handstand?" And I just tried, and I lifted my knees off my arm. So obviously I had some predisposition to
Cool.
having some sort of shoulder strength, and those years of trying to kick into a handstand and handstand on skateboards had not completely been for naught. But yeah, it was definitely yoga that when I was in yoga teacher training, one day we had an inversions class, because it was mostly a vinyasa class. We were mostly doing just warrior poses, and then you would do chaturanga, up dog, down dog, the standard stuff. But we did when I was in teacher training, we had an arm balance inversion day, and I just remember each time we did a pose, it was oh, I can kind of do this one. I can kind of do this one. And we got to handstand, and I tried it. It was oh, okay. I tried to kick up into it, and I just took a few steps, and then I asked the teacher, "What do you do if you are walking? How do you get yourself to stop?" He's like, "Come down and try again." So I was okay. So basically I figured out if I just do a short down dog and I do a little split, if I just take little hops, I'll figure out how to get to a handstand very incrementally. And I did. That was basically all I tried for maybe a month. And then that started to turn into sometimes 3 second, 5 second. And it didn't seem like it took all that long to become more consistent. And eventually I learned how to bring my legs together, and then like I got introduced to different types of inversions, different handstand transitions, like handstand lower into arm balances. I was like trying some Ashtanga stuff. So there was like the jump through and the float back. And then I learned, oh, you can jump up to a handstand and then float through to seated. And then you can, after you do your posture, you can like lift up to a handstand and then go back to chaturanga. So like I was very much like exposed to yoga handstands and had seen people like put their feet on their head and like handstand scorpions. So that's how I like got introduced to handstands, and I got pretty good in that way. Like I figure out how to straddle press. I figure out how to pike press.
That's
like
so interesting. Can I interrupt you really quick?
Sure.
I just had a conversation with some of my students when we arrived here a week ago, and they told me about how they learned handstands also through yoga. They're all women. And how was your experience with the instruction? So they really just told you to try again. Was there anything like chest to wall, or anything from like circus side?
Every so often stuff like that would get introduced. Like a teacher would be like, we're going to do a belly to wall handstand, or we're going to do a 1 minute handstand hold. So like people would try to introduce these things, but they didn't really, I mean, it's hard to tell because this was like 8-9 years ago at this point. So I don't really remember exactly how they were like saying those things.
How they were instructing it.
Yeah, but like I know like the first several times I tried to do a belly to wall handstand, like I try to walk my hands in as close as I could to the wall and like have nothing touching the wall besides like your toes and some people would say like your nose, some people would say like your chest should actually, like I didn't find that I was getting very clear information. I think what yoga was really good for, I was doing a lot of this style called rocket yoga, which is kind of like Ashtanga yoga.
A little more intense, is it? It's
like Ashtanga yoga, but more fun. Like you're really encouraged to take like variations and like modify things and kind of play around. It's still within like a fairly rigid Ashtanga structure, but it was where like I got introduced to like a lot of like arm balance transitions, a lot of like, there was like space to try handstands and play with handstands. So I think what yoga did that was nice was it created a container to just like play and try things. And like people would like, like if I held a handstand, no one was like, oh, your back's arched, your elbows bent. People would be like, oh, Sean's holding a handstand. That's dope. Like, how did you do that? So like, I was very quickly kind of like elevated to like I was like one of the better, I mean, even without any like real formal instruction, like I still quickly became one of the more proficient handstanders in the studio. And it was a very busy studio. It was probably like the busiest studio in New York at the time. But it was basically, it just felt like the people that had been doing it for longer, they had better handstands, and it just kind of felt like the more you practiced, like the more you developed your inversions, and some people cared more about it than others. But it was acro yoga that kind of got me introduced to more strict, like acrobatic kind of form, more gymnastic style handstands. So I started to like hear different cues about like, stacking the bones, locking out the elbows, pushing taller in the shoulders. Like to me, like a straight line didn't really, to me, like if your legs were together, that was a straight handstand. It wasn't like there was all of this like, the spine should be absolutely straight over like a vertical arm with like a hip extension while you're maintaining posterior. It was like none of that was ever a part of it. It was like straight handstand was like legs together handstand. And then like...
And probably banana a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Like probably banana. I think like the first time I saw a photo of my handstand from the back, it was like, oh, one arm is straight and one arm is like 6 inches over to the side. But it never really like held me back from what I was like trying to do at the time. Every so often, I think I would like try to mess around and do like a one-arm handstand because I knew in theory it was possible. But like nothing ever really seemed to like translate into any kind of like success with that. So it was like pretty rarely practiced. But acro yoga kind of introduced me to acrobats and like people from like the actual like acrobatic, like circus acrobatic world. And that was where I started to get more experience around like legit handstand drills or like more like straight body handstand drills. I started to learn about like symmetrical entrances, like tuck jump, straddle jump, pike jump, even though I learned those, I definitely learned that vocabulary from acro, and it's hard to tell. Like, I'm now thinking like, did I really do a straddle press before I did a straddle jump? Which I very well may have. Like that is definitely
Could be. I mean, if you came from a yoga background, it's pretty likely, isn't it? Because
yeah. I've sometimes said some of the ugliest handstands I've ever seen have been pressed into. By yoga teachers. No offense to yoga teachers.
No, but it really is a thing, isn't it?
No, it 100% is. And I don't actually look at like, I'm actually extremely forgiving of bad form unless like you want to do something that bad form is getting in the way of. But if someone's just like doing a handstand because they enjoy doing handstands and they're not trying to try something challenging and like their back's a little bit arched, but they're holding it still, like it really bothers me absolutely zero because it's like they're getting what they want out of their handstand. Or I see people like I actually see a lot of women like talk about like men doing handstands, like, oh, your shoulders are so closed, or like, oh, please straighten your knees. And it's like, it's very interesting how like a lot of the things that are like non-inclusive about like the way yoga people teach handstands, like then like you go to acrobatics and people are very much like, ew, bent elbows, flexed foot. But yeah.
It's funny to hear that from you because you also did skateboarding, and I remember talking to Harry in Perth. I don't know if you saw that interview, and he kind of said a similar thing, like that. Coming from the skateboarding background, I don't know how it is for you, but style matters so much.
Yeah, I think that interview was the first time I'd actually heard Harry talk, and I think we've talked a few times like on Instagram because we definitely bond over the skateboarding thing. To me, it's like a knee being bent or a foot being flexed doesn't like take away from like the aesthetic quality of a handstand. I actually care way more about like if your foot's flexed or your knee's bent, like is that distracting you from something important? Like I was telling someone earlier today when they were like trying to do like they were trying to do one arms and like a straddle one arm, and I could see like their knee was like just bending as like they were shifting over. And it's like, okay, I can't tell you that's the issue of like what's happening in your one arm, but if you take that movement out, we can more easily pick out where the issue is. So like that's why I would care more about like lines and flex feet, but like from an aesthetic point of view, I think they look super cool. And yeah, like I think you should at a certain point, like you want to have control over those things, and like, you know, like Harry can straighten his elbows and he can like straighten his back and like point his feet. But I think the same as me, it's like, you know, that's not going to be like the obsession. Like, someone actually said this, I think it was Dora that said this the other day. If like the teacher is saying point your feet, you're doing a lot of things right. And I think that makes like a ton of sense.
That is such a smart thing to say. Yeah.
Wise beyond her years. And I think that's really true. Like like there are reasons why pointing your feet could be important, but like, you know, like one thing would be like, I think it's really helpful in an entrance to handstand, like the flicking through the toes, like it makes you be able to get up into like the pointing the feet is part of your jump. But if you got into your handstand fine, like, you know, like then that's kind of in the past, unless like your foot's like moving around, and then it's like, okay, why is your foot moving around? Can you stop it? Cool. Yeah. I mean, like, to me, it's like you should have control over these things, like especially if you're thinking about it. But like, I know for myself, like I'm not always thinking about these things because there's a lot of things to think about in handstands.
So what are the things you're working on right now for yourself?
I think for me at this point, within like the hand balance realm, consistency is one of the really big things that I'm trying to like build up. I feel like I've been able to like do cool things for a while, but I want to be able to do them on call.
Consistency in specific one arm shapes?
I mean, I think at this point I can say I have like a very consistent like basics. Like most of the time I start a session with a one arm, like a straddle one arm that's like 30 seconds.
Nice.
And like I can't say that I hit that every time, but like, you know, most of the times if I don't hit that, it's because I didn't set it up right. And that's kind of like why consistency has become like I don't fail that kind of thing because of like a lack of strength. Like there's a certain point that like endurance is kind of a limiting factor in being able to like balance one arms or to have, it's like endurance will be the issue, can be an issue in actually developing a one arm practice because you don't have the stamina to actually do the reps. But at the point that you can get through the practice, then like you kind of have the endurance you need. To me, like the thing that will make a more immediate difference for most people is like specificity and how you set it up. And for me, it's like really been about fine tuning, and it's very much the same thing from like a straddle one arm to a legs together to a tuck, or even like a Figa is a little bit different. But like setting the shoulder in the right position, which like sounds simple enough, but there's like so many things that can make your shoulder go out of the right position.
My shoulder can go into oversplit.
Yeah, literally your shoulder can fall in any direction pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as I've tried to like, so I made this shift to like mainly training on the floor after doing a lot of like canes and blocks for a long time.
Interesting.
Yeah, and like, you know, part of that was like this like ideal of like, oh, well, if you have it on the floor, then you truly have it. And I've noticed a giant help between using things like canes and being able to like take those like gains from the canes over to a floor handstand or gains that you get on blocks. Like I've noticed that like usually pretty quickly you can do the thing on the floor if you're able to do it on blocks or canes. That's
good to know because I've heard opposite opinions as well.
I think that depends how you're doing it on blocks, like or canes. When I first was doing one arms on the canes, I was low grade falling a lot of times, but I was able to make the underbalance save because of the canes. And it was able to give me like the space to like re-lift my ribs or to keep the weight back forward. And sometimes the canes will let you get away with more stuff that you wouldn't get away with on the floor. But I had the experience recently after mostly training on the floor. I went to the canes. So I was like getting frustrated that my legs together holds. Like I really had this like 10-second leg together position like in my head as like when I have 10 seconds every time, that'll mean that I have like that position. And it felt like even though I was doing all the volume that I was supposed to be doing, I was like making the alignment as clean as like could be, and I was like examining it from all angles. It felt like I would be like counting in my head, and like I would get around like 7 seconds, and like inevitably it would just fall, and it was like, how do I control this? And one thing that I did is I went on to the canes, and like I just for like the rest of the session I just balanced a lot of legs together, and like this was something that I could do like over a year ago, but I kept like I did a whole bunch of reps of it, and then like next day when I went to the floor, like it was like no problem. Like my one arms on my legs together position like felt so intuitive to balance because like I was balancing it. I was balancing it in a little bit of a different way, but like you still make those adjustments when like you're falling. It's like, oh, I'm falling this way, let me save it. And
so it's like it buys you more time to spend on the position. Do you think it would make sense then to learn one arm handstands on canes versus blocks or floor first? And then take them over?
I think it's really individual, for sure. Like some people will never use canes and they'll be or blocks and they'll like get it just fine. I would say you want to be able to do like probably like a 5 to 10. I would say at the point that you can do like 3 seconds on the floor in like if you can balance 3 seconds, 5 seconds consistently on the floor, I would say if you take that over to canes, you can very easily turn that into 10, 15 seconds and variations. But I would say if you're not at the point that you can consistently set up a one-arm shape,
better stay on the floor.
Then it's like, or blocks. I think like ultimately block walks are ultimately like one of the best things if like you're thinking one arms. Like even though it sounds, it's like, what? But I was hoping that could get around them. And you totally can, but they're extremely valuable. Like they have like tons of little like hidden one arm lessons in them.
Yeah, you and Dora have inspired me to get back on my blocks that I hate so much, but I'm gonna learn to love them.
Yeah. You know, like I remember talking to Adrian McCavitt about that like way back. Cause like, I think I was at the stage that it was like, I could develop most of like the prereq, like I could do the things in prep. I could do the block walks. I just wasn't really holding one arms that long. And I remember asking Adrian, like, do you do the blocks? Like, not so much, but like they're great. Every time I go back and I do them, like I notice instant improvements. And I definitely like notice a lot of that myself. Like Dora and I had a day where we were like, okay, let's do block climbs. And like suddenly like one arms just started to feel really, really good. And it's like, oh yeah, because it makes you like push up really tall.
Your shoulder remembers how to push basically.
Yeah. And it gives you a very clear visual reference. It gives you a very clear feeling of if you're in the right spot or not. Like the shoulder in feeling, I remember feeling shoulder in years ago on blocks, and I was just like, I didn't have the same words for it. I mean, I was like, oh yeah, if I go to the inside, I can get the step every time. I probably wasn't doing like, if I had to guess, I'm almost sure I wasn't side bending enough. And that was, I think, one of the things that ultimately like delayed the, me progressing with it a little bit, just cause like, you know, on one hand, like you can just like put in the reps and it might just happen inevitably. But if you want a specific result out of your one arm, if you want your one arm to look a specific way, you definitely have to go about training your one arm in a specific way. If you're just like going to be happy with like the feeling of being able to balance in any way that it happens, like then you can train a lot of different things. And I actually did that. I definitely did not take the most streamlined approach. I like experimented a lot. I was like, I wonder if this will be relevant to it. Like there was a time that I was like, I'm going to do a handstand like this, and I'm going to do a handstand like this. And then I'm going to work like shoulder shifting side to side like this, and shoulder shifting side to side like this. And all those things had little lessons pertaining to like one arms within them. But like ultimately, like one arm is like a fairly straightforward
You just
movement.
do the fingertips and the blocks or side bends, or what is it exactly?
Well, the fingertips was the prep position, or the passage, I've heard it called, the piano fingers. Like I definitely practiced that a lot, and I still do it. So like I don't think that we can say that it's not like a standard drill or even like an essential drill, but I've heard multiple people say that you don't need a practice prep to do a one arm, and the better I get at one arms, the more that makes sense. So I've heard like Sasha Bachman was probably one of the first people I heard say this, like side bends and block walks.
That's it.
And that was basically what he said. And Dora said something very similar recently also. And I think it's true. I think that those will teach you the things that you need to know how to do to make a one arm happen consistently and well. I think it's hard to not do something that's imitating the balance of a one arm. And I think that's where prep really comes in. Because it's like, it's not that like, I mean, the whole like idea with the prep is this should be like a placeholder for like not having your hand on the floor. So like this is giving you space to be able to feel the balancing adjustments like in your hand, to be able to feel that like your free shoulder is like in the position it needs to be. Like it's really common, people come into a prep and they like straighten their arm and then their shoulder winds up like this. But to me, like the better prep is like this shoulder's fully pushed out, this shoulder's in the same position, but it's like not doing anything.
Yeah.
Like whether your hand's like this or this or this, it really shouldn't matter all that much. It's all about like everything being in like a fairly specific spot. Like is a thing that you can hold one arms in lots of different positions, but like
which becomes very evident when you look at breakdancers.
Yeah, but if you look at the common elements of like what is like what are they doing, that's the same. Their shoulder is over their hand in both the lateral direction and the front to back direction. Yeah. So the shoulder's over the hand. Shoulder being over the hand is, you can let your shoulder go out. It's like you instantly have to correct it. Like you can't like really like hang out with the shoulder out. You'll notice this like a lot of times when people bend the elbow, a lot of times like the shoulder went out for a moment and that's almost like scooping it back in. But yeah, I've just been really zoning in on like, especially like when you look at like hand balance style, like you see like breakdancing, you definitely see like people use more twists, people use more bent elbow. Bent elbow definitely changes where things can sit.
They got their arms more sideways.
Yeah, there's a lot of different, they figure it out. And I mean, that's kind of like the ultimate like expression of just kind of like following your intuition and like repping it out. And it works because like a lot of them wind up with one arms, but like, you know, a lot of them wind up with a one arm that never really like stops moving around, which might be fine if you don't care if your one arm's moving. But if you want to do like transitions of your legs, like if your shoulder's still moving, it's like really hard. Or you see like a lot of straddle, you see a lot of like other things moving around, a lot of elbow bend, a lot of bent arm strength, which like, again, I have no problem with. And I've seen, like, if you look at someone like Danny Zhu, he's a great example of someone who he started with like all the things that you would say are like B-boy style. And now he has beautiful hand balancing lines and like has combined it into something that's very like unique to him.
I was just going to mention him because I actually interviewed him for the Handstand Press magazine. Cool. And unfortunately, it's in Spanish. So I can't ever do an interview with him for Handstand Diary unless we translate it. But he told me his whole story. And he said that what made his form look like it does right now is that he went to dance school. And he studied contemporary dance and ballet for 2 years. And it automatically carried over into his handstands, which is fascinating because there are videos of him online where you see the transformation of where he was a b-boy and then suddenly he starts to look like a circus artist, but he never went to circus school or he never did anything like that.
It makes so much sense that it's like, oh yeah, of course, like his lines are very ballet-esque. And I guess I sort of known that, but that does make sense that he just went and did like contemporary dance for some period of time.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting one. People talk about like, if you learn something poorly, it's hard to fix it. I think that's such a bullshit statement.
I agree.
I've had such an easy time changing my form. Like it's never really felt like now I do what some people might call like kind of like the Russian style of hand balance, like very very pushed out shoulder, very straight spine. Like the back stays the same shape between a straddle, between a tuck, between a diamond, whatever shapes. I started doing that style when I started practicing head balancing because that was what Dan Lydiard had suggested. And then because he was like, your back's arching, and I'm like, I don't see it. And like he pointed out what was like in the video like what seemed like a very little arch. That to me it was like, what, that counts as an arch? Come on, man. But then like I was like, do you do this? And like I started to feel where it made a difference to like stack my spine in a much more like strict vertical way. I started to feel it like make an immediate difference in like the head balancing. Like it went from being like impossible to like, oh, now my body stays still in one spot. And then I just asked him like, do you do that in your handstands too? And he's like, yes, of course. And I was like, huh. And I just went and did I could already do like a 30-second one arm. And like, I just did that. I think I maybe had done like a 30-second one arm like a few months beforehand. And then like, the first one arm I tried to do with that form, I held like 36 seconds. And it was like, and I think the first thing I thought about it was like, people say it's hard to switch your form, but like I literally just did it in one try. And like I think if you're very like if you're very convinced that you're right and that this is like the way that you should be doing it, it can be hard to like switch it over, like to change your style about it. I think things that involve fear and that happen extremely quickly. Like tumbling things, things that have more danger to them. I'd say those are the kind of things that it's not always as helpful to switch around styles. Like there's different tricks in acro that like perhaps have taken longer because we very like drastically switched our approach to it like several times.
Mm-hmm.
But within handstands, even like the differences in styles, like I feel like are relatively minor.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Dora talks about like contortion style, and I'm like, when I'm doing like my straight body shapes, like the differences are relatively minor. Like
mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, her ribs stick out a little bit more and her back arches a little bit more. My back is extended but not quite arched, and my legs are a little bit higher. It's like there's differences, but they're not like really all that different.
And it's true what you said before. Like it totally depends on what you want to do with it. If you're just doing it for yourself for fun, who cares?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I've taken a lot of liberty with my practice. It's like I don't need to fly it on anyone. Like
mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be performing hand balancing.
Yeah.
So like whether my form winds up being a little bit off today because I did something, I experimented, which this hasn't happened as much lately. But I think even like when I was learning it, that was always like, I wasn't like obsessed with it happening as fast as possible because I knew there wasn't really going to be anything that changed when I had it. The only thing that like kind of kept me like,
I love that.
The only thing that kept me on my toes one of the things that kept me on my toes when I was first learning it, the one arms though, was like I had other friends that were also going for it. Mm-hmm. So like being a little bit competitive, I didn't want like my friends to like leave me in the dust. So, I mean, I think community is really big for helping you like push yourself.
Yeah, I actually was going to transition to that part because it seems like you facilitated a really cool community here with Warrior Bridge. And tell me a little bit about the community in New York City.
Yeah, New York has a really interesting, I mean, it's New York City, so it's like so many communities. I mean, yeah, there's just like within New York City, like there's the yoga community, there's the acro community, there's like a small but like dedicated group that trains hand balance. There's people that used to do gymnastics. There's people that do like other circus arts.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys have meetups and jams and things like that?
There are some. It's been kind of a wild like ride the past 2 years, obviously.
Pandemic, yeah.
So we haven't
obviously.
Yeah. So we did have like, and we do have like quite a few like outdoor like handstand meetups. It's usually like a fairly small like crew of people that is like quite dedicated to handstands. It's a bunch of the people that you've met here, plus like Dave, and I guess you can probably hear Sam's voice now if you listen closely. But yeah, like for a few years we've been like meeting up at like Madison Square Park, or the acro community always meets up like at parks. So
was it easy for you to open up this gym? Like, how was it when you opened up? You opened up in 2015, right? It was,
so we opened in the very beginning of 2015. I think it was like January 3rd. And it was really interesting because when we first opened, I kind of was just like, yeah, we're opening a studio, and like we're gonna put the schedule up and people are gonna show up. And like, you know, it was one of those things that like you open the doors and you're like waiting for the people to walk in. It's like, where are they?
So you really just opened up your gym without...
Well, I had a business partner who was like the senior partner who was able to do the financial backing for it. And I basically was able to just like help put together the studio because I was like 25 years old at the time.
Oh.
Yeah, I was like a full-time yoga teacher, and like I was looking for a place to teach a yoga for martial arts class actually. And on the floor above the place I was training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I knew there was like an Aikido dojo. I didn't really know what Aikido was. I knew it was a martial art, but I like walk up the stairs and I see that there's this, there were these mats that were on like right now. They were like laid across the floor, and it was actually a really big, beautiful space with like a skylight. So like I looked at it, there was a class schedule on the door and it had like 5 classes. And it turned out this guy, Gary, had been, running this place that would double as a an art gallery that would transform into an Aikido dojo.
Oh.
And that was kind of like
cool.
This like little passion project, innovative idea that he had, because his idea was that an art gallery mostly uses the wall space and Aikido dojo mostly uses the floor. So why not just like share the rent? So he had kind of outgrown that space by the time I had met him. And when I like emailed him, he told me about this idea that he had for a place that blended Aikido, Tai Chi, meditation, and yoga. And I saw a place that was a store opened up like for lease, like downstairs from the apartment I was living in, that was around the corner from where we are now. And I was like, this would make a great yoga studio. Ultimately, it like was like kind of like, I just chose like the first thing that was like located close to me. But we opened that space.
Which is convenient.
Yeah. But we opened that space together. And I think, ultimately it was acro yoga that like really built the original community around it. Like I was able to bring some students over from the place that I was teaching, but I taught at a place that I taught at yoga to the people, which was they wouldn't publish who the teachers were on their schedule for most of the places. And then even the one studio that did have my name on it, it just said Sean. There was like no way that, unless like I had a personal relationship with someone,
you wouldn't know who was teaching.
I couldn't it was really hard for me to bring people over. So like we kind of like built the community, the original studio around like people in the neighborhood, but acro was we had mats, which was actually set us apart from like all the other places that had acro yoga, where they had like yoga mats on a hardwood floor.
Right.
So we started having one acro class, and that turned into 2 acro classes, then turned into 3. And then pretty soon there was everyday acro, and we had an opportunity to move into a bigger space, this one that we're in now. And that was also when I got an opportunity to become an owner in Warrior Bridge. So for the first like many years, it was very much like, even our things like yoga, even handstands, they were all kind of like fueled by the acro yoga community. And then it was in like the last few years, kind of as my, for one, we got more serious about acrobatics, and it became more than just like acro yoga. It became more, we were doing like hand-to-hand and Icarian and other more advanced like acrobatic skills that we were actually learning from like circus artists. And then when you meet the circus artists, like you start to hold yourself to a higher standard.
Yeah.
And then I saw like Dave Hawes was like making his progress to the one arm, and I like was like, oh damn, I don't think I can do that drill. I gotta get on it. So like I started working with a coach, Olaf from Montreal. He who's a professional hand balancer. He would come to New York every like 6 weeks or so, and he would just teach privates for like 6 days straight, and I would try to scoop up time with him. And that was the same teacher that like Dora, Dave, and I all started with, and a lot of people in New York.
There's one last thing I want to briefly talk about before I run up to Sam's class.
Yeah, sure.
And that is your new circus space. You're opening a new circus space. Yeah, tell us about it.
We're opening Cirque House. So Warrior Bridge is now so it's 2021. So like the studio is coming at the end of this year. It'll be its 7th year open.
Wow.
And we've done like a lot here. We were fully online for over a year because of COVID. And we connected with people all over the country, from the acro community, the hand balance community. So we've taken this quite far, but something for a long time that we've known like New York City really needs is a place to just train. So Cirque House is going to be mainly a studio that's dedicated to open training space.
So you just come in and you do your own thing, basically.
Yeah. So it's a 5,500 square foot space in Hudson Yards, 30-foot ceilings. It's going to have all of the circus toys. And you come in and you do your own thing. We'll have our community of instructors that you can do private lessons or you can book small group lessons with. And we want to create a space that instructors and teachers can kind of like offer stuff to their students out of the space. But for us, we really want to provide the space and like let people figure out what they want to do with it. And we will have it's a really gorgeous space. So hopefully we get some nice B-roll of it before you leave. But we're going to have festivals there. We'll have performances there.
Nice.
So it's a really exciting
Oof.
thing. It's actually been in the works for very, very long time. It's been probably since like 2017, 2018. I've actually been looking at a space to do this because, we actually moved into this space because it had taller ceilings than the old space.
And then you realize you can't do any
Well, we knew we could
aerial.
we could. Well, we never were able to do any aerial because like the ceilings aren't riggable, and it made no sense to like invest in making it riggable. And then when it came to standing acrobatics, we could do like the very most basic level of like hand to hand standing in the studio, but like pretty quickly people want to have like more space, and then like people don't want their feet touching the ceiling. So we've been looking for spaces, but I've had this very strange criteria where I want like cheap rent. I want it to be in Manhattan. I want it to have really, really tall ceilings, but also natural light. And like basically I wanted the perfect space, and I didn't want to pay that much for it. And it took a global pandemic to maybe make that a possibility. But, over the past several years, I've like been going into basements, and I've been going up to like attics and like abandoned racquetball courts, and like underneath the New York Stock Exchange in the third sub basement. So I've like been all over looking to do something like this. And most recently, like I was in disbelief until I literally got like a countersigned lease, because I was just like so convinced like, it's not over till it's over. I'd had like leases fall through. I'd had like deals accepted, and then they wouldn't happen. So, now this one, it's been a very long time coming, and it feels like the time is very right for it. And I've already gotten like a ton of support from people like in New York City, in like the aerial community that I've never met. They're like, how can I be a part of this? How can I help out? So
Cool.
I think we have some really cool things to see coming out in the next few months.
Yeah, it seems like the demand would definitely be there.
Yeah, I mean, I know.
It sounds so exciting.
It's there for me. And if my Facebook friends list is like as honest as they are on the post, then we're in good shape.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me. And I wish you the best of luck for opening your new space. I hope that I can make it here again and take a look at it once it's open, because I know you're going to open it like 1.5 months after I leave.
Yeah, it's going to probably be like end of October. We're hoping to have like a big grand opening party festival beginning of November. Yeah,
2 months after I'm gone, unfortunately. But
and you got that citizenship, so.
Yeah, gotta come back here for sure. Yeah. I'm in love with the city anyway.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show, and I get to be one of the people on the YouTube channel now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, your classes are awesome. And if you ever come to New York City, definitely check out Warrior Bridge. And by that time, probably Cirque House is going to already be open. So definitely a place for you to come and do handstands and learn from these people, because it's epic. Thank you so, so much for watching. Don't hesitate to leave comments down below if you have any questions, or if there's anything we didn't cover that you would like to know. But other than that, it's never too late to do what you love. And I'll see you next Monday on the Sonji Show.